An active investigation now underway. Bray was last seen leaving her Laurel workplace early Tuesday morning. Her car found hours later and miles away.
The level of violence and brutality suffered by Ms. Bray is astonishing. This was a violent crime, and her end was violent and awful. Additional charges may be forthcoming as additional evidence comes forward.
Laurel, located in Yellowstone County, Montana, is described as a scenic and rural area on the outskirts, with stunning trail routes, camping spots, and lakes, and bustling, lively, and vibrant in the downtown area, always with something happening. Parades, small festivals, great shops and restaurants, and a strong sense of community spirit. More than 7,000 people live there, and in 2009, one of those people was Lori Bray, a 57-year-old woman. Lori worked as an attendant at one of the local casinos and reportedly led a quiet and peaceful life, keeping to herself and enjoying her home with her two rescued dogs, Mac and Nikki. She was part of a large and close-knit family with a son named Justin, whom she talked to every day, 5 grandchildren, many brothers and sisters, and 8 nephews and nieces. Lori was an animal lover, especially dogs, and besides taking care of Mac and Nikki, she donated to rescue centers and charities, often caring for other dogs until they found permanent homes. Her boss and former roommate, Kathy, described Lori as the sweetest, kindest, and most gentle person she had ever met, with a beautiful spirit and a welcoming smile. Lori was always willing to help anyone and was someone people turned to. Her son Justin noted that this kind nature could sometimes be a double-edged sword, as Lori could be overly trusting of people, unable to see their negative side, even when they gave reasons for doubt. On September 30, 2019, it was a relatively typical day. Lori had worked the night shift at Cedar Ridge Casino and was about to wrap up her day. Shortly before midnight, Lori finished her shift, locked up everything, and headed straight home, as she had to be back early the next day. On October 1 at 8:30 a.m., casino staff noticed that Lori was strangely absent, but she hadn't called to explain why. Around the same time, her boss Kathy was on her way to work, driving on a deserted and isolated road with only fields in sight for miles. She spotted what seemed to be Lori's car, parked at a strange angle at an intersection, seemingly empty. Lori didn't live near that area, and there were no shops or other houses around, making her presence or the car's presence there nonsensical. Kathy stopped but remained cautious. Kathy kept her distance from the car, choosing not to get too close. Instead, she decided to call Justin, asking him to go to his mother's house to check on her. She wondered if she was overreacting, but unbeknownst to her, Justin also independently felt that something was off that morning. He hadn't received his usual morning call from his mother, which was unusual. Justin headed to Lori's house, calling her phone as he approached, but the silence on the other end was unsettling. Upon arrival, he noticed her car was not parked outside, tightening the knot in his stomach. Upon entering, he was alarmed to find his 2 dogs, Mac and Nikki, unattended and showing no signs of being fed, something his mother would never allow. A thorough search of the house revealed nothing. The bed was neatly made, there were no signs of breakfast, and everything seemed strangely quiet. Justin called Kathy back, and they both agreed to check the car together. Justin quickly confirmed that it was his mother's 2003 Chrysler sedan. The sunroof was open, the door handles indicators were broken, and inside, on the back floor, he could see her purse and the Takakis. Her iPhone was also on the floor, lighting up when receiving calls. Although Justin wanted to open the car and search thoroughly, he had the instinctive feeling that this was the work of the police and no one else. They called 911, and when authorities inspected Lori's car, they found bloodstains. Covering more than half of the back seat were bloodstains, and there was a mud imprint on the passenger side door. Lori's clothes were also found scattered, including her underwear, which appeared damaged, as if forcibly removed. The hooks of her bra were bent, and some clothing items also had bloodstains. All evidence pointed to a violent and disturbing scene that had taken place. Lori Bray was now a missing person. Everyone acted immediately. Many in the community knew her well and wanted to help. Friends began posting on social media with someone writing, "She would never leave her dogs. They are her world." Someone has to know something. No clue is too small, and I ask everyone to pray for her safe return. People began organizing their own searches, and everyone was looking for Lori. The case instantly captured the attention of the media and the public, as it was highly unusual for something like this to happen in that area. The location where her car was found was grassy, muddy, and the field seemed to stretch on forever, making the search for clues a challenging task. Given the terrain conditions, the searches were difficult anyway, but as darkness began to set in, things became impossible. Authorities asked volunteers to stop and wait until the next morning, which people did reluctantly. The police requested security camera footage from inside the casino from Kathy. Not only did she provide them, but she could also identify most of the people and provide their details so they could start interviewing them on the night Lori was last seen. Lori was closing the casino as usual, restocking and cleaning. Two women briefly started a conversation with her at the bar, and Kathy said she knew them as regular patrons. Another person who appeared was Diego Hernandez, who worked with one of the women. Lori asked to see his ID before serving him, and a few minutes later she gestured to the clock, indicating that the casino was closing and he needed to leave. There was a brief conversation before Lori continued with her closing tasks. At 11:20 p.m., Lori grabbed her purse, locked the door, and left. The casino was now closed, and the car was parked within sight of one of the doors. She briefly returns for a moment, seemingly to talk to someone before getting into her vehicle with another person.
Dozens of friends, volunteers, and authorities scouring open land north of Laurel in an effort to find something that will lead them to 57-year-old Lori Bray.
An active investigation now underway. Bray was last seen leaving her Laurel workplace early Tuesday morning. Her car found hours later and miles away.
And that's where searchers gathered today. Q2's David J. was at the scene, has the very latest from the sheriff. David?
We're out here at the intersection of Buffalo Trail Road and Laurel Airport Road, close to the cemetery. Family and friends came out at 10 o'clock in the morning to search for her, about 60 to 70, according to Sheriff Mike Linder. We're also standing fairly close to where her car was found, and we had a chance to talk with the sheriff about the disappearance and what he knows so far.
We're out here right now searching because this is where her car was. We don't have any evidence or any other indicators that she might be out here. It's just out of an abundance of caution that we want to make sure she's not out here in serious need of help. And so that's why we've got all these volunteers. We got information that this female was last seen probably between right around 12:30 in the morning, seen leaving work at the casino. We had a deputy that actually drove by here just on routine patrol and saw the vehicle and stopped and checked on it as well. But the way the vehicle's registered, we had no idea who it belonged to. So that took a little bit of work. Right now we've got detectives writing search warrants and working on some of the technology aspect, phone tracking and that type of stuff.
Sheriff Linder expects the search to go into the evening until about dark. They've been searching all around here, the field's over there, and he says that they'll wait for more information to come in and maybe change that up just a little bit. In Laurel, David J. reporting for Montana's news station.
The police quickly established that it was 22-year-old Diego in the car, and at the time he entered the passenger side, he was the only person besides Lori still on the premises. There was no one else around. Detectives needed to know why he left with her, and if he had seen or heard anything that night, perhaps another customer who might have stayed or acted strangely. Shortly before midnight on October 1, Diego Hernandez was found at his residence. He confirmed it was him on the cameras and that Lori kindly offered to give him a ride home after they talked at the casino. He said he impulsively went to the casino because he could get free drinks there. He arrived around 9 p.m. and stayed for a few hours using some machines and chatting with people. Diego said Lori took him to his house, thanked her, and said goodbye. He then went to meet a friend to continue the party. He claimed not to have seen Lori since he saw her drive away, and it was simply a brief encounter and a kind gesture from a stranger. However, something caught the police's attention that they couldn't ignore. Diego's face, hands, and torso were covered in fresh scratches. An officer inquired about it, saying it looked like someone had fought him and it was a bit concerning. However, Diego claimed that the scratches occurred 2 days earlier when he had a fight with a friend named Nick after going to a local strip club. He said Nick wore a ring that cut his face. He was very straightforward and calm, confident in what he was saying, and showed no signs of dishonesty. With that, the police backed off. They found Nick, who admitted to having a scuffle in his car. He said Diego started freaking out suddenly and was agitated. Nick said at one point he put Diego in a headlock before pushing him out of the vehicle. However, he claimed there were no scratches involved and he was shocked to see the state of Diego's face. He had no reason to lie. He had already admitted to pushing him out of the vehicle, but the scratches simply weren't related to that incident. Despite what Nick had said, which coincided with parts of Diego's story, the reality was that the police had no other leads besides him. Diego was still the last known person to be with Lori and, by his own admission, was in her car. The security camera footage from Cedar Ridge Casino couldn't confirm if the scratches were there at the time. However, more images from another bar just a few hours earlier showed that he had absolutely no marks on his face. Early on October 2, the search team resumed and continued throughout the day. But at 7:30 p.m., detectives received the call they feared. A man was riding in a TV in a wooded area when he made a horrifying discovery. He had found the body of a woman lying naked on the ground. He didn't need to get close to realize that she had been severely beaten and was already dead. The police strongly felt they knew exactly who it would be, but made no announcement.
A woman missing, a body found, and a lot of questions tonight surrounding what Yellowstone County authorities are now calling a homicide.
Yellowstone County Sheriff Mike Linder not confirming the female victim found east of Laurel last night is that of 57-year-old Lori Bray. But the search for the missing Laurel woman has been called off.
The news of Lori's disappearance now spread, and the area was soon filled with police and forensic experts. It was soon confirmed that the body was Lori Bray's, less than 2 miles from where her car had been abandoned.
Sheriff Mike Linder says the medical examiner determined the body found east of Laurel Wednesday night is that of missing woman 57-year-old Lori Bray.
Although another step forward, that information and no suspect in custody is not easing the minds of some Laurel residents.
She was at the bottom of a ditch, completely naked and in the fetal position. She was covered in abrasions and bruises, with blood on her nose and hair. There was swelling around both eyes, a swollen lip, and several broken ribs. The cause of death was later confirmed as strangulation, but the examiner noted that she also suffered blunt trauma to the face. A sexual assault kit was used, and although blood was found, there was no presence of semen. Some of the marks on her body indicated that she had been dragged downhill or pushed. Now they knew she had likely been killed inside her own car and then transported there. Near her body was a small necklace with a cross, and nearby there was a quite clear shoe impression. This impression seemed to match the one found inside Lori's car. Lori's death, in the condition she was found, shocked the police. They described the level of violence and brutality as staggering, stating that whoever committed this act was simply a monster. Colleagues and friends were perplexed, unable to comprehend who would want to harm her. They emphasized that Lori was loved by those who knew her, had an excellent reputation in the community, and never mentioned problems with anyone. The police obtained some additional clues when it came to light that Lori had been involved in abusive and controlling relationships in the past.
We've heard from several people in the community concerned there could be a killer walking the streets of Laurel. Well, Sheriff Linder tells me if detectives had enough evidence, they would have someone in custody. But regardless, that doesn't mean you can ever let your guard down.
It was suggested that these individuals be investigated. However, Lori's contacts were completely dismissed for various reasons. Broken and scared, fearing that this was not an isolated incident and that something could happen to someone else. One resident described Lori's death as deep and detrimental to the community as a whole. However, everyone set aside their concerns to come together in support of Lori's family and friends, raising money to help take care of her dogs, support Justin, and contribute to the funeral costs. The police managed to identify several locations where Lori's phone had emitted signals between midnight and 3 a.m. The casino where her car was found, the location where her body was discovered, and an area near Diego's house. The pings around Diego's house occurred just before the location where she was found, at which point she would have already been killed, constituting significant evidence. Even more interestingly, while at another bar in the hours before going to the casino, Diego spent the night pressuring random women to take him home, including the woman working behind the counter. She refused several times and stated that she felt very uncomfortable with his harassing behavior. On October 4th, detectives executed a search warrant at Diego's residence. They collected the clothes he was wearing that night, some of which appeared to have been stained and were freshly laundered, drawing attention. Immediately, as the room was filled with dirty clothes, detectives also found a pair of Nike sneakers that were soaked and had been recently washed. The shoe soles matched the impression found inside Lori's car and near her body. Detectives began examining Diego's phone and discovered that, just a few hours after Lori's death, he made some interesting online searches. How long do investigations last? And how long do FBI investigations last? Were among the searches he conducted. He went to the police station, provided a DNA sample to the authorities, and after that, changed his story. He claimed that he and Lori spent time talking in the car and were getting along. They smoked some cigarettes and ended up having sexual relations near his house, but he swore he didn't see her after that. The police didn't have enough evidence to detain him at that point, so he was allowed to go home. Everything was processed quickly, and in no time, they had everything they needed. Diego's DNA matched the one found on Lori's body and under her nails. Diego was called in again, where he would change his story for the last time. Now he claimed that he and Lori had been in a relationship for over a year and were just keeping it a secret. He said she always wanted to keep it confidential, but detectives reviewed over a year of phone records for both and found no evidence that they had even talked before. This was corroborated by casino cameras, which showed Lori asking for Diego's ID and talking to him only to inform him that they were closing. Their phones had never made contact or been in the same locations until that night. 2 days later, he was charged with first-degree murder.
Some breaking news.
Yellowstone County Sheriff Mike Linder says a suspect is now in custody tied to last week's murder of a Laurel woman. 22-year-old Diego Hernandez was taken into custody at his home in Laurel around 8 o'clock tonight. He's now booked into the Yellowstone County Detention Center facing a homicide charge.
It has been 1 week since the 57-year-old Bray left her late-night job at the Cedar Ridge Casino and never made it home.
Large impact on the community. Everybody's fears, of course, are heightened. Awareness is heightened. You've seen incidences of where things that might have been mundane before now, get looked at it at a whole different light. We're large enough to have resources, but we still have that small town feel. Very safe place to live. You have crime that's possible in any place.
This took everyone in the area by surprise. Diego was well known and well liked, always appearing polite, friendly, and quite reserved. His friends said he was simple and genuine, leaving them stunned. The police theory was as follows, considering all the security camera footage that seemed to show Lori willingly getting into the car with him. With no signs of coercion, it indicated that Lori volunteered to give him a ride home, as he had initially claimed. Probably she felt sorry for him, given the late hour. Diego would never reveal what happened, and if there was any conversation, but he categorically denied harming her. As news of his arrest began to spread, a vigil for Lori was held in her favorite park, where she used to walk her dogs. Fundraising continued, and many people were making donations to the charities Lori was so dedicated to.
Bray was described by many tonight as a kind, loving woman who would do anything to help her friends. One in the crowd carried a sign saying, "Lori is loved," and some wore purple t-shirts with the message, "We will always love you," written on them. Christy Salvinson was Bray's next-door neighbor for 3 years. She didn't realize Bray had so many people that cared for her.
I've come to learn that everybody in this community knew her and loved her. She was the greatest person. She would give her shirt off her back to freeze so you wouldn't freeze. That's just the type of person she was. The Laurel community, I've learned since this has happened, is a very tight-knit community. Everybody's just coming together to light a candle in her honor and her memory.
Diego Hernandez pleaded not guilty, and the trial of the now 24-year-old began in March 2021. He maintained his innocence, still claiming that the two were in a secret relationship, something that infuriated Lori's family and friends, as they insisted it simply wasn't true. In the opening statements, Diego's defense lawyer suggested that Lori's abandoned car could have been disturbed or contaminated before being searched by authorities, meaning the evidence found in it should be questioned. Additionally, they mentioned that methadone was found in her system, something for which she had no prescription. They raised this issue to suggest that if she was using methadone without telling anyone, she might be hiding a relationship with Diego, a theory the prosecution considered ridiculous and baseless. The prosecution presented a strong case and called for expert testimony on DNA and forensics.
The level of violence and brutality suffered by Ms. Bray is astonishing. This was a violent crime, and her end was violent and awful. Additional charges may be forthcoming as additional evidence comes forward.
They claimed that the DNA found in Lori's car, on her clothes, and under her nails had a chance of 1 in 60 octillion of matching someone other than Diego.
Jury walked through the crime scene and brutal murder of 57-year-old Lori Bray with dozens of photos and testimony tying a 24-year-old Laurel man to her death.
Yellowstone County Sheriff's detectives collected evidence from Bray's car, including the leather from the back seat, along with fingernail clippings that came from Bray's body. DNA supervisor for the state crime lab, Joseph Pasternak, ran the DNA tests and found traces of Hernandez's DNA inside Bray's fingernail clippings. Hernandez's attorneys tried to poke holes in the DNA evidence by questioning the crime lab's peer review process. The defense noted that the peer review given to the crime lab's reports doesn't rerun the tests. Rather, the peer review is only a second look of the report done by other crime lab staff.
This to me almost looks like they've been reached the discoloration that was present when I took photographs. Obviously, still there. Some of the markings down below here, some stains that were on the back. And then the back side, again, the same discoloration. Could be washed or bleached, possibly.
Yellowstone County Sheriff's Office Detective Troy Chabinaw utilized Verizon Wireless RTT data to determine where Bray's phone was on the night of October 1st. RTT stands for Range to Tower, which is what Verizon uses to connect cell towers with cell phones and determine their location. Chabinaw was also able to pinpoint where Bray's car was found and the general area where her body was located. Cell phone geolocation analysis expert Michael Fegley also took the stand, concluding similar findings. He created a video representation using Google Earth to also show where Bray's phone was the morning of October 1st. The data that was collected from Hernandez's phone did not offer any useful information for detectives. Chabinaw suspects that Hernandez's cell service had been ended prior to being picked up with Bray. A list of Bray's phone records were obtained, determining that from a year prior to Bray's murder, Bray and Hernandez had no contact via messaging or phone calls.
A side-by-side picture of Hernandez's scratches next to Bray's beaten body is shown to the jury. The image is too horrific for television.
Tiny Lori did not stand a chance that night.
After several days, both parties concluded their arguments, and only 2 hours into deliberations, the jury returned with their verdict. Diego Hernandez was found guilty before being sentenced. Before the sentence, he requested the opportunity to testify, and things took an unexpected turn. The man who had been denying any violent act for over a year sat down and said, "I did it. I killed Lori." The room was shocked, and the judge stated that he had never seen anything like it in his 4 decades of courtroom experience. On that day, Diego Hernandez was sentenced to life imprisonment, with a minimum of 35 years to be served before he could be considered for parole. There is no indication whether he plans to appeal. The case of Lori Bray deeply affected many people, both those who knew her well and those who had never met her before. The community felt a collective loss, and a resident stated that it truly changed a lot about the proximity and sense of security that everyone had always felt. Everyone lost a truly special person. Kathy said about Lori, there was nothing she wouldn't do for anyone, even if it caused difficulties for her. She was just a very caring and loving soul. No matter what anyone did, she saw the good in everyone.